RChili is the trusted partner for parsing, matching, and data enrichment, helping companies hire better talent faster. RChili offer innovative solutions built for the future of technology and recruiting to ATS, job boards, staffing agencies, and enterprises. They help you connect candidates with jobs by enhancing candidate experience, simplifying the hiring process, reducing hiring costs, saving time and money. RChili also has its multilingual resume parsing app available on Oracle Cloud Marketplace and Salesforce App Exchange. For more information, visit www.rchili.com.
What great ideas are so close within your grasp? Seeing other points of view, anticipating change, considering multiple possible turnouts, acknowledging uncertainty, searching for compromise. We're going to talk about how to get over those limiters of innovation so that you can extract better thinking from yourself and your team. So let's talk about how to win the future.
Tech businesses in talent acquisition and recruitment are now prefaced with the term AI. So as a founder of one of these businesses, when should you start your AI journey? Joining me this week is Mark Chaffey, CEO at Hackajob. Mark discusses how and when he decided to make AI core to his product, how it would affect his customer bases, and if it was the right move for his company. Welcome back, everybody, to the Marketing Rules podcast. It's my pleasure to my long-suffering kind of latest guest, Mark Chaffey from Hackajob. Mark, this has been a long time coming, right? I think we've been backwards and forwards trying to get you on board for, I'm going to say, close to a year at this point. And I'm bordering on blaming you for most of that, but I will take some of the blame. Mark, for the people who might be tuning in for the first time and don't know who kind of what you do and what Hackajob does, maybe you could give us kind of your resume.
Yeah, for sure. James, thank you so much for having me on. I'm taking 99.9% of the responsibility for the fact that it's taken us far too long after a little bit of flirting at RecFest last summer. So, for those listening, my name is Mark. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Hackajob. I've spent the last 10 years building Hackajob, co-founded it with Razvan whilst we were at university. And it has been a crazy ride, lots of ups and downs, lots of changes in that time. But today, Hackajob is a community of over 1 million members, all focused on technology professionals in the US, the UK, and India. And we work with some of the most exciting companies in the world, some of the largest organizations in the world, all on their hiring strategy. So we have a couple of different products. We have a sourcing platform for internal TA teams. We have Hackajob On Demand, which is our contingent hiring platform. And just last week, we launched the AI Collective, specifically focused on AI talent. So spend far too much time thinking about the world of recruitment, hiring, and specifically of the focus on tech.
And before we jump into kind of today's topics around kind of AI and that kind of cool stuff, the journey of Hackajob has been an interesting one, right? Because as you mentioned, you've been around for 10 years. So you're no longer a startup, right? However, it does feel like over the last few years, you guys have just everywhere. So something changed at some point. And, what was that what was it that changed?
It's so interesting because I think a lot of the core product and value prop is very similar. Our core thesis as a business really hasn't changed in 10 years, which is every company in the world is now a technology business. So therefore, the ability to engage, hire, retain technical talent is a boardroom priority. And there should be a dedicated way for you to do that. I think you, in a world like TA, you probably reach an inflection point where you have enough of the big customers, enough of the big, reference names that it starts becoming a little bit more mainstream. And I think, through the COVID period, we really benefited with a lot of free capital, a lot more hybrid and remote work. And then post that period, it's been tough, which has meant a number of our competitors have gone out of business. And now when you look at the ecosystem, actually for specialist technical hiring platforms, there isn't too many out there anymore. So I think partly luck, partly just perseverance. I think anything lasts for 10 years, you end up building, a decent reputation for yourself. And now, this global lens that we have is obviously a lot of fun. We're chatting just beforehand, right? I'm based in New York predominantly these days. And so being able to grow the business in the US is really fun, and doing a bunch of sales calls where people have never heard of Hackajob, whereas in the UK, I think we've done great activations. RecFest has been a major part of that, and being a part of a lot of the really powerful networks in the UK. So the product has got better and better. There's no doubt about that. We rolled out Hackajob Intelligence last summer, which is our AI matching platform, and the results speak for themselves. So, there's definitely been an improvement to the product, but it is just interesting that the core value prop really hasn't changed. But I think just as you reach that inflection point in an industry like TA, you start being known, you start building that reputation, you start getting those really positive reviews on both sides of the marketplace, and you end up becoming, I like to think of us as a scrappy startup still, but you're right, 10 years in, maybe that's not fair.
Yeah, I don't think you can do that anymore. I don't think you can say that. That time has passed. You're all grown up now. And you mentioned that we are going to talk about AI today, but you mentioned your new AI product, and we're not going to kind of linger too long on the ins and outs of Hackajob, because we'll do that towards the end maybe. But when did you realize that AI was going to be part of the journey for Hackajob? At what point was it? When it became really already kind of very mainstream, or did you realize at some point way before then that we have to be integrating some of this stuff?
It's a brilliant question. So AI is now like synonymous and just used in lots of different words and lots of different ways, all to try and mean lots of different things. Hackajob always had a machine learning component, which is a branch of AI. Ever since like 2017, one of our first angel investors was a guy called Ahmed Medhat, who was setting up the data science team at Meta in the UK. He's an incredible guy and worked very closely with us to build some machine learning recommendation systems and just how the system learns over time. And so absolutely, it's been on our, a key part of the product and value prop. I think one of the challenges when you're a founder is understanding like what is hype cycle and what is real. And so in 2021, Web3 and crypto became all the rage, and there was a bunch of like blockchain recruitment platforms, and there was going to be no more CV or resume, and it was all going to be on a blockchain, etc. And we looked at that internally, and we always approach this lens of like, what problem does this technology solve? And we couldn't find a useful use case for blockchain and Web3, so we didn't integrate that into the platform. When ChatGPT exploded at the end of 2023, which is crazy that it's like still, maybe it was the end of 2022 actually. But whenever, a long time ago now, we were like, what can we do with large language models? And so the initial thing that we did was run an internal hackathon, where we just gave the team a bunch of problems and said, use some LLMs to create some products. And actually, one of them we used was our AI bias decoder, which we'll chat a little bit about when we think about bias in the recruitment process. And what we saw with the underlying technology of large language models is you can now do stuff that you just feasibly couldn't do before. Like it unlocks new ways to match talent. So we took a decision at the back end of 2023 to rewrite our core matching engine from scratch, which is a pretty brave decision, like 8 years in. There's a lot of investment that's gone into that. And that culminated in launching Hackajob Intelligence last summer. And we can get into how we approach LLMs and AI, but it is now pivotal to the business. And I think beforehand, it was probably an element of the business. Now we are rethinking absolutely everything we've always done, every long-held belief, because you are now using technology in new ways to solve problems that you couldn't solve before.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on one of the topics that we were going to kind of talk about, which is kind of leverage AI to eliminate a bias in the recruitment process, and specifically in tech recruitment, because that's your area of expertise. So, from what you've learned, how do you even go about that, right? Because it sounds fraught with danger. It sounds fraught with all the to use the same word, bias that comes with using AI in the first place, right? So how can you then leverage AI to then eliminate any other bias, basically?
Yeah, it's almost an oxymoron, right? To be exactly. Using AI to eliminate bias. I think if you take a step back, I think something that's just fascinating when we compare AI to humans is that it's not like humans aren't inherently biased, right? The baseline for recruitment is bias. And actually, a lot of the reason why some AI systems have been found to be biased is because they are trained on real data sets that have been created by humans that are inherently biased. And what I'm finding fascinating with the rollout of a lot of these AI-driven products is it's almost like we want to hold the AI to a higher standard than we hold humans. And I think there's no better example than self-driving cars. Self-driving cars today are already safer than humans, but I think it's probably going to be 5, 10, 15 years before they're mainstream. And, we saw it with one of the self-driving cars. They had a crash and suddenly they get taken off the road, right? Imagine if we did that to humans every time they took or had an accident. So just as a mental model, I find that interesting that the bar is much higher. When you look about recruitment, there have been very public cases of there being clear bias driven by AI systems. One of the major tech companies came out in 2019 and they tried to automate their hiring process and ended up being fraught with bias. One of the big ATS providers are currently going through a law case. And my suspicion is we will see that over the next 12 to 24 months. People are going to get sued in really big ways. The way we've approached it is 3 different aspects on how we believe we can either ensure there is no bias or reduce, go one step further and reduce bias. So where are we ensuring there's no bias? We believe right now you should not be using AI systems for automated decision making in the recruitment process. So there should be a human in the loop that is taking the final decision. The system might make recommendations, but there should be no decisions taken. And if I was a TA leader or a CHRO looking at solutions right now, I would be very concerned about any AI automated decision making because, again, unless you can really understand the data set it's been trained on,
What do you mean by decision making? What exactly is that? Is that specifically a yes or no to this job seeker / candidate, or is this, what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So, this isn't publicly available yet, but we've released our own AI interviewer, which is fascinating. And, we're doing a bunch of pilots with customers at the moment on it. When a candidate interacts with the AI interviewer, it does like a 15-minute screening call. It would be very easy for the end of that, for the AI interviewer to say reject or progress, right? And literally updates the ATS, rejects the candidate, off they go, or progresses. Right now, like our view is that AI interviewer should make a recommendation saying, based on everything I've got, there's my recommendation, but a human is still in the loop taking that final decision. Where it's probably more crude right now is in the application stage. So a lot of ATSs have rolled out AI ranking systems, and there's now whole services for job seekers where people will make your CV or resume like ATS friendly because they know how these AI rankers are working. Again, there's a difference between an AI ranking 200 applications from, hey, here's most suitable to least suitable, to actually saying, no, you should just disqualify these 50 people. Now, there is some level of disqualification you can do. If they can't work in your location, well, then you can disqualify them, right? If they need visa sponsorship and you don't sponsor, you can disqualify them. But if it is starting to take subjective decisions based on somebody's resume, which, by the way, could be generated by AI as well, hilarious. You have an AI system taking a decision on an AI-generated resume. Like our just strong view right now is you shouldn't have automated decision making. You should have some type of recommendation system where there is still a human in the loop taking that final decision.
Yeah. So that's one of the things around kind of bias, I guess, isn't it? By still having humans. But as you said, all humans are naturally biased. So what are the other things that you can try and kind of remove from that process? I guess all kinds of different biases, right? You're kind of looking at to try and remove, whether it's accent bias and all kinds of weird things that you kind of come across these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, there's some really cool tools out there that happen with this, not just Hackajob related. Where do you see bias in the process, and where should you eliminate it? For what long time, there was like a big push on like blind CVs and blind resumes, remove name, image, any reference to gender. To me, that doesn't, and there's been a lot of studies this, that doesn't actually change anything. Because ultimately the hiring manager is taking an end decision. And if they're biased, they're going to be there being able to tell you, hey, you're biased or not. Where we're looking at it, and then to shout out some other products that I think do a really good job of it. One is in the training data itself. So one of the unique things about Hackajob is it's all our own data. We're not inferring anything. It's people signed up to our community. And when people sign up to our community, they can self-disclose gender, ethnicity, veteran status, etc. And so when we're doing all of our training, we can see any impact, positive or negatively, against any of these groups of people, which is really powerful. then any piece of content that is on Hackajob, whether it be your outreach messages, your job descriptions, your company branding page, all go through a bias decoder, again, which uses AI to determine is any of this language bias. And what's really powerful there is you can combine those two data sets. So you can run an A/B test and say, our decoder said that this actually is bias, make this recommendation, test it for 30 days, and then see the impact it has on that group of individuals. And that's really interesting. The second pillar to us, it's hilarious, right? LinkedIn just says something's important, and now the whole world says it's important. And LinkedIn decided a few years ago that skills-based hiring is all that matters, and we should just do skills-based hiring. And I still don't think there's a unified definition of what that really means. But anyway, that's fine. But if you take it at its simple level, one of the benefits of tech is these are more quantifiable skills. And so you can have more skills-based assessments. And so we've been really big from day one on letting candidates spotlight themselves and showcase themselves. All of that said, there is still a hiring manager taking a decision. And I think this is where these interview co-pilot tools are really interesting. MetaView is probably doing the best right now, at least from what I hear from customers, where you have an AI in the interview. And the early use case here, like the Wedge product was, it's going to transcribe the interview for you. And yeah, awesome, great. The clear benefit to me there is actually you have real hiring manager training in how to conduct an interview. And like, if you're going to eliminate bias, it has to happen at that stage. Like, that's actually where you need to make the impact. And that's where I think these tools and products are going to go, like a MetaView, is actually, no, this is, yeah, it's great, it's got the transcriber, but actually it's going to ensure you've got fair, consistent process in what you're doing, and you're asking the same quality of questions, you're giving people the fair chance, etc. And almost at the end of it, it's like the candidate might get assessed, but the interviewer might get assessed. We use ScreenLoop as our ATS, and they've got this feature. And at the end of the interview, I get assessed on how good I did as an interviewer, right? And I think that's a really interesting use case for AI, and I think where it will have the biggest impact on bias.
And is there anything specific around kind of bias and biases in tech recruitment, which obviously you guys kind of specialize in? Is there anything that other tech recruiters and people recruiting in that space should be more aware of than anything else?
Yeah, I don't think any of this is going to be that groundbreaking, but age bias in tech is a real thing, and something that I think we should be very mindful of. I think it's very easy to think that, tech is perceived as a young person's game, etc. And we fundamentally disagree with that, especially with how much effort and investment there has been into career changers and career returners and that piece. And I think that age bias probably doesn't get as much attention as it probably should. I'm fascinated just personally from like social mobility. I grew up in a council estate, and I don't think we've done, Hackajob included, a great job of understanding social mobility, and how do we make sure that everybody from every walk of life gets access to this tech and can impact that. Obviously, the big popular one in tech is gender. It's the big push. Everybody is pushing for more gender diversity, which is awesome. And, we've got some great stats, and we've helped companies impact that space. And it's awesome how much attention that gets. But I think there's some of the ones that, the age, the social mobility, I think are some of the ones that maybe don't get the airtime that I would love them to get, especially from, what we see on how companies interact on the system.
And just coming back to the gender bias kind of piece, because you said it is the one that kind of gets all the headlines. And what is the state of play in the tech space as you're seeing it now? Is there kind of close to parity, or is it how far away, or
It takes time. There has been so much investment and so much work that at the early careers level now, it's pretty good. Like, you can run an early careers program, and it'd be 50-50 from a gender perspective, and that's awesome. Still probably, if you look at people graduating computer science degrees, it's still more men than women, right? So it's not perfect. But actually, early careers level, you can make a real impact. As you go through the seniority stack, it gets worse and worse and worse. And so that is obvious in some regards, right? Like, somebody that's a graduate today will take 10 years before they're VP of engineering or whatever it may be. And so you hope that it's where the I in D&I becomes really important, right? We hope that it's not just about getting these people in. We create a really inclusive workplace where these people are progressing through the org, retained, etc. So I think as you get to the senior levels, it's still really tough. And then I think the other thing that people miss is, like, we use the word tech to define tech workers, but there's like 200 different jobs within tech. And there's some areas that there is a lot better gender diversity, and there's some areas where there isn't as much gender diversity. And so something we will often do with our customers is partner with them at a more holistic level, right? Okay, you've got 500 hires to make this year. It is likely these areas you can have a bigger impact on gender diversity than these areas, just because that's what the population, reflects on and looks like. So I think there's been a lot of progress at the early careers level, which is awesome. I think we need to continue that focus, and then hopefully over time that will trickle through to the more senior level roles.
And again, this might be a difficult question, and you might not necessarily have the answer. But from the stats and analytics that you have, why is it that there isn't that parity at the senior levels? Is it people moving out of the industry, or just with from a for a gender perspective, going off in for maternity leave and not going back into the workforce? Is there something that you can kind of glean from all the analytics you have?
Yeah, the last D&I report that we released, which is a little dated now, it's probably 15 months old. We've got a new one coming. Did look into this question specifically, and it's a couple of the topics you just hit on there, right? It's like, yeah, naturally you are going to have people leave the workforce. I think what's more interesting is the percentage of people that leave the profession, and I can't remember off the top of my head, so I don't want to quote a wrong stat, but it is shocking how many people get into tech and then decide to leave tech fully from a gender perspective. And again, I think that's where the I probably doesn't get talked about enough in D&I. It's like a big push top of funnel, big push getting people into the organization. But if you don't have an inclusive organization, by the way, that's true of any profession, not just tech, right? As we've designed our business, like sales is another environment where it can be very male heavy. And I've seen all male sales teams sometimes don't create the most inclusive environment. The second you do get a better gender diversity in there, suddenly it's a more inclusive environment, right? So I think a lot around the environment that we need to create inside these organizations for inclusivity. So there is definitely a decent percentage that are just leaving the profession, which is shocking. Like, that's the worst. And then there's going to be more natural reasons for that. And that's, normal and to be expected. But like I said, my hope is that we do get the inclusivity piece right. And so all of this effort at early careers will work its way through, and there will be more female role models for people to be inspired by.
Yeah. All great stuff. And so the next stage, obviously, this, what we just talked about, really focuses on the kind of top of the funnel stuff, right? Getting people to apply for the jobs and getting them through the interview stage. But what about some of the kind of, matching and things like that, right? Because matching technology has been around for absolutely since the year dot, right? And I know that a lot of, again, AI technology was quite biased when it first kind of came out, and we've kind of covered that. So what's the state of play with that as it sits at the minute?
This is where I could nerd out for hours. This is where I'm spending a lot of my time right now. So if we take a step back and just think about what is a large language model, what's it enable? Well, effectively, a computer can now understand and reason in natural language, right? We used to have to use programming languages and it just different layers of abstraction in a programming language, whereas now we can just do all of that in natural language. So then what's the use case? Well, when a recruiter or a hiring manager reviews a CV or a resume, they're not looking at keywords and doing like some weird Boolean string in their mind to be like, okay, cool, this person's got this, right? They're like adding a bunch of context around the type of companies they worked at, maybe where they went to school, and the environment that they've been in. Then compare that to how online recruitment has been done. It has been these weird and or constructs. It has been Boolean searching. It has been, very light touch matching platforms. Well, you now have computers that can read a resume just like a human can, and can reason back to you as a human why this person's a good fit. But the advantage that a computer has is it can read 500,000 resumes in 5 seconds and be able to add all of that context in, whereas you as a human can't do that. And so I think there's like 2 or 3 really major innovations in matching technology. Firstly, you can now match against completely unstructured requirements, and the system can add context. So what do I mean by this? If I'm looking for a software engineer, I could start my search by saying, hey, I'm looking for a software engineer that has worked at a product-led company like Spotify. Mm-hmm. Our matching system would then be able to show you a candidate that has worked at Snapchat and say Snapchat is a similar product-led company to Spotify, right? Like, through no hard coding, through no like relationship there, the system knows to do that, just like you and I would know how to do that. So you suddenly have a world of potential on how you go and find talent. That's one example. Another example is like in the world of tech, there's always new technologies evolving, and it's impossible to know the relationship between all these skills. And so rather than relying on keyword matching, actually you can have a whole knowledge graph of context between different skills. So your search may say, hey, I'm looking for somebody who's worked with a JVM programming language, and the system will know, well, Kotlin's a JVM programming language, so I can, show this candidate back, even though they might not have mentioned JVM on their CV at all. And the final point, which I think is the one that resonates most with recruiters, is a lot of like the first and second gen of matching platforms had like a match score. It'd be like, this candidate's an 88% fit to your requirements. And then you'd look at the candidate and you'd be like, they're completely irrelevant. And so now I've lost all trust in that match score, right? I'm like, well, okay, I just can't believe that. Actually, what the new matching systems do is they explain back to you why they think this candidate's a good fit. Like in English, hey, you've told me you're looking for this, or this candidate has all of this experience, and this is why they're a good fit. And you might disagree. You might say, well, actually, you're wrong. You can tell the system you're wrong and it will learn and get better. So rather than having these like abstract 88% match scores, instead you can have like real explainability on why this person is a good fit for your role, which I think builds a lot more trust and credibility with the recruiters engaging with these systems.
And I guess that leads to the kind of a question that I think has been kicking around for years now. What place then does that leave the CV/resume in this process? Because it's probably not fit for purpose in the AI age. So is it still needed? Because you can get some of this information elsewhere. You can build up a bigger picture of someone from other channels. Do you need this arbitrary 2-pager that says, especially in the age of LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera? What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, there's a few things I'd say. Firstly, I've always thought like the CV is a very 2D document to try and describe a 3D person, right? It's like, 2 pages of like work experience, education, whatever. And it's like, well, actually, I'm far more interested in like what podcast you listen to and what was the last book you read? And, that gives me a lot more depth to your personality and who you are than, I worked at this company and used these languages or whatever. It's really interesting. We've heard from a lot of customers that there's been like a massive increase in the volume of direct applications over the last 18 months. And a lot of fear around these are AI generated applications. And there are tools that will rewrite your CV based on a job description. So it looks like the perfect match. And we're doing a test with one of the large retailers in the UK right now. And their head of TA turned around to me and said, I don't think we'll ever trust a CV ever again. Actually, instead, we're going to give a candidate an AI interview and let the candidate tell their story to an AI interviewer. And that's fascinating because a recruiter can only screen 10 candidates a day, whatever it may be, when an AI interviewer can suddenly screen 100 candidates in a day. And so actually, do you end up giving people more opportunity and more potential than what you did previously? And you get a much richer context from them. So I'm really excited about the tools that we will create as an industry, not specifically as Hackajob, over the next couple of years to give candidates a better opportunity to spotlight their experience. Does it mean the death of the CV? I doubt it, because I think change actually happens in humans way slower than we'd like to admit it. And I think we're all just so used to it that I think it's unlikely the CV gets completely discarded. But would it be a supporting document, hopefully, and actually you'll end up with this much richer profile of individuals?
Yeah. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. As always, we'll include all of your details on the show notes. And so if anybody wants to know more about you and Hackajob, it'll all be there. But for now, thank you very much.
Dude, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so glad we finally got to do this, man. Massively appreciate you.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the Marketing Rules podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all other major podcasting platforms. I've been your host, James Whitelock, and I hope you can join me and more amazing guests next time.